Hello all, I'm Sai and you're watching The Book Dragon. In today's video, I'm bringing to you my spoiler-free review of Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. I wanted to read this way back in 2021 when it was released itself, but because of various issues, I got my hands on the book last year only, and I tried to read it during the end of last year, but I was not able to because I was not in the right headspace. So I just went forward and decided to read it in Jan, and I finished reading it. I liked the experience of reading this book so much. It was not as good as Nevernight for me. I read Nevernight in 2021, but this was nearly as good as it if you ask me. So without any further ado, let's get into the review right away. So in Empire of the Vampire, we follow our main character Gabriel, who's half human, half vampire, and he's called a Silver Saint, who's the last of his line. Now the work of the Silver Saints is that they have to slay vampires and guard the world from their attacks, and their work is very much high in demand right now because the sun has set many years ago, and ever since there has not been a sunrise in this world, because of which the vampires have actually taken over the entire world and they are trying to consume each and every human being and turn them into vampires as well. It is just like the situation which we see with the Night King in Game of Thrones. It is clearly visible that the vampires have outnumbered the humans right now, and the story is narrated by Gabriel in such a way that he is having this interrogation with another vampire where he is narrating his own story to the vampire, and using that narration we see what has happened to Gabriel and what all he has done in the past which have made him end up in this place in front of the vampire who's actually chronicling his life. Apart from Gabriel, we don't get the story narrated from any other character's point of view but just a third person's point of view alone. But I should say that taking Gabriel, who's the main character, and using his perspective to narrate the story from for most of the book was really nice, because I was able to learn a lot more about this main character, and being a character driven reader myself, I like the main character here because he is totally morally grey, just like most of the other Jay Kristoff characters that I've read so far. And the entire story itself, even by being grimdark, doesn't feel like it is very heavy to read. The story is actually narrated to us from 3 different timelines between which we keep on switching continuously. The first timeline is the one during which Gabriel is actually a teenager, and there we see most of his family life, his relationship with his parents and sisters, and after that we see him getting trained to become a Silver Saint in a church kind of organization where all the people who are to turn as Silver Saints are being trained. In both of these situations we see Gabriel as being a teenager for most of the time. There are also some huge chunks of time which are missing in the first book, which I think will be told even more properly and elaborately in the further books inside the series, but in order to know that we just have to wait. The second timeline which we get is during when Gabriel is in his early 30s. He has a group of people whom he is working with right then also because of certain circumstances, and he is also trying to guard them from the vampires and also doing some stuff which will help himself as well as the world as a whole. Apart from these two, we have the third timeline during which Gabriel is actually narrating his story to the vampire. We keep on switching in between these 3 timelines, and it is a bit confusing at times because it's not like we have a certain pattern in which we see the present first and then we go to the teenage, then switch back to the early 30s and get back to the present again. It's not like that. It keeps on switching. Sometimes we see him in the teenage and then get back to the present. We see him in the early 30s, we go back to the teenage and come back to the present. It just keeps on varying in different combinations, but it's not confusing in any way. Moving on to the characters, we follow Gabriel and his family. He has a mother and father and 2 sisters whom we spend little amount of time with when he is in his teenage, and after that we spend most of the time with his friends from the place where he is getting trained to become a Silver Saint. Some of his friends whom we keep on seeing are Aaron, Baptiste, Astrid and Chloe, and apart from them there are also so many other novice characters whom we see in that particular training place who come in and out of the story continuously. They are not that important characters for the moving of the story, but they are also present in order to give us a fulfilled vision of how this place is and what are the abilities of the characters there. We also have some teacher characters who come in and out of the story just like the other side characters whom I talked about, but there is this one teacher alone called Greyhand who has a major presence in the first half of the book compared to the second half. He's there in the second half also, but his presence is more prominent in the first half and we see a lot of action scenes involving him also. Next, talking about the world building, I should say that the author has done a really good job when it comes to the world building, because this world is very elaborate and huge in its scope, and the way in which he describes each and every city that we travel through is really different. At the same time, there is also this common thread which runs in between the different cities in order to keep them safe from the vampires. It's not like it is the same in each and every city. It keeps on varying in tiny little ways here and there, and that just provides a proper variety while maintaining that homogeneity properly, while maintaining that homogeneous nature properly in order to keep this world together. When it comes to the vampires also, we don't just have normal blood-sucking vampires alone. The vampires also have factions, and there is a hierarchy when it comes to the vampires, and each and every faction has a different kind of ability that the other factions don't possess, and there are also certain age limits for the vampires that are to be met by them in order to have those abilities and transfer their abilities from them to other human beings whom they are infesting. All those things were really well done by the author. At the same time, time, the magic system which we see here, that is exhibited by the silver scenes, is very nice to read about. It is definitely a simple yet very painful magic system, and the way in which the author made use of the magic in very small quantities here and there, especially during fight scenes alone, was really nice. It's like using this magic against the vampires that was given by the vampires to the human beings, and that sounded a bit poetic here and there for me. Finally, talking about the pacing, I should say that the pacing was the only thing which I felt like an issue when it came to this book, because as I said before, we follow 3 different timelines of the same character, and he's narrating his own story as different chunks from different timelines, and that got a bit confusing for me in the beginning of the book. I had to get used to it. At the same time, he also uses a lot of quotations, because most of this book is just like dialogues that are transferred between different characters, and now to show us that they are dialogues, there are a lot of quotation marks that I used, and because of that it got a bit confusing for me in the first 50 to 100 pages of but after that I got a hang of it and I was able to understand it very easily. But up until that point it was a bit uncomfortable for me to read, and it also made me want to keep the book aside at instances, because this prose itself is very gritty and dark in its tone. Adding the quotations and the dialogue to that mixture just made it a bit more difficult for me to handle, and because of all these reasons and the constant switching between the timelines in which the story is being narrated by Gabriel to us, I think the pacing suffered a little bit. Other than that, I don't have much complaints about it. So finally, I rated Empire of the Vampire 4.5 out of 5 stars. I thought that it would be a 5-star read for me, but still 4.5 star is a really good rating. And that's it for my review of Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. If you did find this video useful in some way or the other, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also share it to your friends. And if you want to get more content from me, do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.